今天的翻译教练，我叫 Felix。那我们今天所要讲的主题是关于说我们的对于你的髋关节、臀部的激活的矫正性运动。那我们会有今天的佐藤博士来为我们主讲。
Hi, this is Dr. Sato in the Peak4 studio to give you the live broadcast. Today, we're going to do some hands-on stuff. I got a lot of questions from different sports coaches about hip activation. I heard this a lot in Taiwan, and then there are some mistakes that the people make. So I want to make sure that the people are on the same page to do certain exercise correctly.
就在台湾呢，很多的体能教练啊，或是一般的肌力训练力量的教练呢，会有很多的疑惑，说对于如何去启动我们的髋关节，怎么去激活我们的髋关节的能力。那发现到很多人都有一些误解或一些错误的动作，所以我们在这边呢会做一个详细的说明。
Yeah, the reason why I picked this topic is in the past. In a university setting, I used to use what's called EMG, then electromyography, and you can actually test how much muscle activation you have from a certain area. And then we've done this series of times, and we know what kind of a movement or what kind of intensity actually provide higher EMG activities from the muscles.
好，那在大学里面做研究或是做讲课的时候呢，会有使用 EMG， 就是所谓的肌电图的部分呢，来去测验说你的肌肉到底正确的、真正的使用了多少，或者说被激活了多少。我们会用 EMG 做一个测试。
So let's go to the slide here, talking about the glutes muscles. Okay, and if you actually look at the glutes muscles, it has a different function. Okay, of course the size is different between maximus, medius, and the minimus, but more importantly, each one actually have a very different role for human movement.
好，那在这边呢，讲解到这个臀部的肌肉的部分，那我们主要就是有臀大肌、臀中肌、臀小肌。那这三个主要的臀部的肌肉呢，它会有不同的功能。那重点是我们要看它分别是占有做了哪些事情这样。
So the maximus, okay, it provides the hip extension, which is to go backwards this way, but also it has a function of external rotation. Okay.
好，那我们看到臀大肌的部分，它主要的功能呢，它会做一个髋伸展的动作，也就是说呢，将你的腿呢是往后做一个伸展，做一个往后侧推蹬的动作。那除了这个之外呢，它还有做一个外旋的功能。
And the medius muscle is actually for the abduction, which is going to what's called the frontal plane. It's going to the side way.
好，那再来是这个臀中肌的部分，它主要的功用呢是做外展的部分，也就是在你的额状面，然后做外展。
And the minimus muscle also support the role of abduction, but also it has internal rotation.
好，那在臀小肌的部分呢，它除了会支援你的这个外展、髋外展的动作之外呢，它也会做一个髋内旋的动作。
So if you think about this, if you're using more glutes max muscle by externally rotating the leg to do back squat, okay, it means that minimus muscle is being stretched out, okay, because it's an opposite between maximus and the minimus.
好，也就是说你在做深蹲的时候，如果你的这个脚尖呢是做外八，就是做一个髋外旋的动作的时候，那这时候除了臀大肌之外呢，你的臀小肌它也是会被做伸展，因为臀大肌跟臀小肌它是外旋跟内旋的功能，它两个是相反的。
Okay, so let's go to the pelvis. Okay, so now it's not just about the muscles, now it's about the structure. Okay, and when you talk about the pelvic stability, we're talking about how equal your pelvis position is, whether you're looking at from the left and right, or from the side view of anterior or posterior tilt.
好，那接下来我们讲到骨盆的位置的部分。那现在讲的就不是肌肉了，而是结构的部分。那如果我们从正面看呢，它可能有左边或右边的倾斜；如果我们从侧面看呢，它可能有分成前倾或后倾的状态。
Okay, there are many muscles around the pelvis. Okay, and then if you have one muscle or one group of muscle being weaker than the other or tighter than the other, of course it's gonna tilt the position.
好，那在髋关节就是骨盆的位置附近，它有很多的肌肉。如果你的这些肌肉它有左右平衡，或者是说有一边比较强壮，一边比较虚弱，或者是说一边比较紧绷，一边比较有弹性的状态下的话呢，这样看起来都会让你的骨盆是呈现有一些倾斜的情形。
For example, I've seen this type of posture from shoulder, but it's actually not coming from the shoulder, it's actually coming from the pelvis angle, little bit different between left and right. So if you actually check the position of the pelvis, it might actually come from the lack of pelvic stability.
好，那可以看到这一张图，就是这个有点倾斜的正面图，可以发现到有些情况呢，会是你的肩膀有一些高低肩的情形。可是这个高低肩呢，并不是来自于你肩膀真的有一些状况。很多时候呢，是来自于你的骨盆已经是有一个倾斜的情形的。那这个情况下呢，就很容易说，看到我们的结果就是也有一个高低肩的状态。
And I go through this a lot in my body assessment course. I talk a lot about the posture because the posture of your spine can really influence the position of the pelvis as well.
好，那在这个我们身体评估的这些课堂里面呢，也会讲到这个脊柱的部分。如果你的脊椎它是有一点驼背的状况，它其实也影响到你骨盆的位置，这些姿势的变化都可能会有影响。
So let's look at the sitting position as an example. So those of you who sit all day for your work or driving a car for long hours, okay, you usually see different type of sitting position. And then you can see this from the image that however you sit, okay, the pelvis position is so different and then that changes your spine angle as well.
好，那接下来我们讲到是这个坐姿的情况下你的骨盆的状态。那可以看到这上面的图案，它每一个坐姿呢都有一个不同的骨盆情形。那也有些可能你要开车啊，或是坐办公室一整天，都可能是在图上的这些状况之一。
So as you can see here, I'm talking about the hip muscle activation, not only from the athlete's perspective, but also for general population too.
好，那像在我们做这个骨盆的激活啊、髋关节的激活的矫正性运动的时候，其实不单单只有对于运动员族群。那如果说你是一般族群啊，像是上班族啊、久坐的族群，其实这些东西都是很适合你的。
Okay, so the real question about this, okay, many of you probably have seen some exercise like a hip raise, like this one. Okay, this is a very common one that a lot of trainers said, oh, this is a really good hip activation or using a glutes to do this exercise. But the question is it really activating your glutes muscle?
好，那可以看到这个墙上的这个图吼，现在墙上这个图的人呢，正在做所谓的臀桥式的部分。那很多的教练呢，或是很多人会说，这个臀桥式就是来激活你的髋关节、激活你的臀部的一个运动的选择动作。但是我们的问题变成说，它真的能够激活它吗？如果你只做这个臀桥式的动作，真的能够做到这个激活的功用吗
？For example, people who have little bit of an arch on their back, typically when they do this exercise, I hear this a lot, but they feel it so much more from the hamstring muscle, not so much from the glutes muscle.
好，那像很多人的姿势，就是说你在做这个动作的时候，它是有点拱腰，也就有点翘屁股的状态下去做的话呢，很多人会反映说，他的感觉，他这些使用的感觉是来自于他的腿后腱肌群，而不是来自于你的臀部的肌肉。
I also heard many people saying that when you do this exercise, they feel it more for the lower back, not so much from the glutes.
好，那甚至会有些人呢说，他在做这个臀桥式的时候，觉得是下背有感觉，而不是在于臀部的肌肉有感觉。
So what I'm trying to get at is, just because you do the exercise, that does not mean that it activates the same way for different people, because the different people have a different mechanism.
好，那就是在我们做这些运动的时候，你在做同样的运动，可是不代表说每个人都有同样的感觉，因为每个人的状态呢，每个人的身体的机制是不太一样的，所以并不意味着说你做同样的事情就有同样的结果。
So people who have been training with me, and then also the people who have taken my courses have seen this kind of what's called the variation of hip raise exercises. I actually do this as part of the core warm-up before we actually do practice. And this one has a little bit of progression model to make it from easy one to harder ones as the progression.
好，那所以很多人在训练的时候，就有一起经历过这个过程，就是臀桥式的变化型。那可以看到这里有1、2、3、4、5，它就是一个进程，你可以从等级1，然后到等级5这样的进程来做训练。
So just by looking at this, I have total level 5 of hip raise exercises. For example, really good athletes doing a level 1 of hip raise probably doesn't activate the glutes a lot because they're strong enough. So you have to go to a little bit harder exercises in order to activate those muscles.
那所以在这边会有等级1到等级5，是因为说，有些人啊，像是有些比较强壮的运动员，在做等级1的时候呢，他没有办法去激活到他的臀部，因为他的臀部已经够强壮了，所以这时候呢，就会依他的能力，然后从1，然后进阶到2，然后3、4、5这样的方式来进行。
But I'm talking about this one more for people who can actually do these kind of exercise correctly. Today, in a hands-on session, I want to actually show people who feel like they don't feel it so much on the glutes, okay? Because probably lack of proper mechanics. So I want to show you guys different ways to activate the right muscles.
好，那因为有些人在做这些动作的时候，他因为身体的机制不是那么好，所以他感觉不到他的臀部被激活。那等一下我们就会来示范说，如何去正确的去激活你的臀部髋关节的能力，这样。
And then the way I do this is actually, it's in isometric contraction. Okay, so I'm gonna put the person in isometric contraction to get more activation from those muscles.
好，那待会呢，我们使用的方式会是做等长的收缩，用等长收缩的方式呢来去激活那我们每个人的髋关节的能力，这样。
Okay, so let's have you on the table here. And what I want to do first is just do the hip raise exercise. So I'll let you do a couple times, go up and then down. Okay, and then one more. Up. Okay, so this is the level 1, right? And then if people say that, oh, I don't feel it so much, I feel more for the hamstring or lower back, what I'm gonna do is when he raises the hip up, I'm gonna put my hands on the hip bone and then try to push down, okay? So you're gonna have to fight it to push back up, okay? So you're gonna go, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, good? Okay, so that way, you cannot see this from this view, but his face is red. It tells me that he's fighting to push back. Okay, so we'll do it one more time. So hip raise, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. Okay, so that way, I think that he can feel so much more for the glutes to push back up. Okay.
所以在这边讲的是，当我们在做这个臀桥式的时候呢，你一开始可以先让你的客户做一个动态的动作。那动态动作做完之后，他可能觉得还好，或是他没有什么感觉的时候，你就可以做一个一样臀桥式。只是这时候呢，你会需要让他是维持在这个姿势下，然后做这个等长收缩，他会感觉到他的屁股在出力的感觉。那你可以将你的手呢放在你客户的髋关节上面，对他施加压力，他就停在那里，然后停5秒钟。然后再下，然后这样做重复。这时候他应该感觉他的屁股会做比较多事情。你可以在这过程中呢，去提示你的客户。
Okay, so let's have you back here and do the level 2. The level 2 is you do the hip raise, and then from here you bring your knee up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this one against it. Ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
好，所以这时候教练做的是往下压的动作。那你的客户做的事情是把膝盖往这一个方向推的动作，就是对抗他的能力。
Okay, so what he has to do is two things. One, he has to use this leg going this way, so he's using his hip flexor to push. But this side of the leg has to stabilize so much. So I'm using the pelvis in two different directions here.
好，所以刚刚在做的事情是这样子：当你的客户站起来的时候呢，他这只脚是做往下推的动作，那这一只悬空的脚呢是做髋屈肌的这个方向的动作。所以这时候你的髋关节呢是做两个不同方向的事情，一边在地上的脚是往地板压，屁股推；这边悬空的脚呢，它是做一个髋屈肌的收缩的动作，这样。
Okay, so let's do one more time. So hip raise first, and then knee up. Ready, go, push, 1, 2.
所以这时候呢，我的脚是往这个方向推，教练的手是往这个方向推。
Good. Okay, so that way you have the pelvis going different direction. That means that when you're walking, when you're running, it actually functions the same way.
好，所以刚刚做这个动作的时候，它是两个不同方向，你的骨盆呢是做一个不同方向的旋转动作，就像你在走路的时候呢，骨盆也是在做不同方向的旋转动作，这样。
Okay, let's go to the level 3. So one leg out this way, and then this time you get your leg pushing this way up. So once you get your hip up, okay, and then you push. Ready, go.
好，这时候呢，我伸直的脚呢是往这个方向推，那教练的手呢是往反方向做下压的动作，所以也是一样是不同方向的动作。
Okay, so compared to the knee, now the leg straight, so longer leverage. Of course, it's a little bit harder for this one. So the leg raise, some people ask whether they should do it lower or higher. It depends on how much flexibility that person has, of course, because if the person has very tight hamstring, I cannot do this exercise here. So it's okay to be a little bit lower.
好，所以这个动作来讲的话呢，当你在屈膝的时候，屈膝做这件事情的时候，跟你腿伸直的时候，它的差别在于，你的腿伸直的时候力臂比较长，所以它这时候你的客户感觉到会是比较吃力的。那至于说你的腿可以抬多高的状态呢，是取决于他的客户的髋关节柔软度在哪里。
Okay, and then I'll show you the other one going this side. So this time I'm gonna actually let him push up with this leg, and then this one to push down. So he's gonna do, ready, go, push, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. Let's do the other side. Ready, go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I let him push this way and then this way, and then I'm giving that resistance to do isometric contraction.
好，所以这时候比较特别，是你两只脚伸直之后呢，都是悬空的，一只脚呢是往下面，像我这只脚是往下面，那这只脚呢是往上面。那这时候你教练呢所做的事情就是反方向的施压，在那个地方停住，在那停住给它压力，一样是做等长的收缩。
Okay, to have you back on standing position. Okay, so just showing several different examples of isometric contraction. Okay, you can ask him, or you can probably tell them how hard you actually have to push, and then how hard you actually feeling in pelvic area.
好，所以在做这个动作的时候，虽然它看起来只是静止在那边，可是这时候呢，你的客户这时候应该是感觉到是最大出力的。所以像我刚刚在做的时候，虽然好像只是在那边同样的姿势下，可是实际上我已经尽我最大的努力去对抗教练的力量，所以这时候其实我是感觉到蛮吃力的。
Okay, I believe the number one mistakes that a lot of the trainers and then coaches make mistake on what's called a corrective exercise or activation exercise. They do balance related exercises. For example, being on a single leg or being on a Bosu ball, air disc, those kind of stuff to create an unstable surface. They're not the activation exercises. They are actually more for rehabilitation, also the neuromuscular reactive exercise. It does not necessarily activate those muscles in a higher capacity.
好，那所以在这时候最常看到我们训练员或者教练常犯的错误，就是说，把所谓的稳定训练啊当成矫正性运动来做。就像有些人会 先让你的客户做一些在波速球上站着啊，或者是单腿站着啊，或者是等等之类的这些运动，这些稳定性平衡的运动。可是问题这时候它所刺激的效果是说，你的神经肌肉去让你的身体去维持平衡这样子，它并不是真正去激活你的髋关节。那这样的运动比较适合用在像在复健的时候所使用，所以这是我们常见的一个错误之一。
And this is purely from the evidence-based information, but also from my own research experience that when people cannot activate a certain muscle, usually a lot of coaches are very conservative, so they try to use a lighter resistance. But lighter resistance doesn't mean activation. You have to use a higher activation, okay, with a higher resistance.
好，那在这些科学证据的支持下呢，会发现到很多人会想要去激活你的客户某个部位的能力。那这时候他可能会用比较轻的重量，但是实际上的状态下是，当你用比较轻的重量的时候，它并没有办法去激活到你客户的某些部位。反而是你要用比较高的负荷、比较高的强度状态下呢，你的客户的你想要去激活部位，它才会真的被激活。
So I'll give you one kind of good example for this kind of case for the balance. Okay, my PhD research was about the weight distribution asymmetry. For people who have left and right asymmetry, okay, when they use the lighter resistance, they maintain that asymmetry. But when the weights gets heavier and heavier, your body is forced to be very equal. So it tells me that if you have a somewhat high resistance, your body automatically correct to be as close to be 50-50 as possible.
好，那在博士论文里面，他所做的研究是说，那个重量的重心的转移，然后跟这个不对称的关系这样子。那他在他的研究里面发现到，如果你用轻的重量来做训练的话，这个不对称的情形呢，它会维持住，它并不会缩减不对称的状态，反而是你使用比较高的负荷、比较高的强度的情形下，你的不对称的情形呢，反而会趋近于比较平衡的情况。
Okay, and then the second one, you have to be able to do this without causing pain. Okay, a lot of time if you use heavy weights to do exercises, maybe it might cause a pain, okay, or people might think that a higher risk of injury. That is part of the reason that I do more the manual resistance to provide a near maximal effort to be able to do this. Isometric contraction, much less injury case than doing very fast dynamic motion.
好，那这时候我们要谈到第二点是说，如何在你不会产生疼痛的情况下，也就是所谓的无痛训练下的，你要去怎么去激活你的身体？那通常我们在这些使用这些动态的动作，然后使用高阻力的情况下，很容易产生一些疼痛，或者是说有些人会觉得，这样是不是提高了受伤的风险？所以在刚刚我们示范的运动里面呢，我们使用的是等长的收缩方式来去达到一个激活的效果。那也因为等长收缩，它不像你的动态动作一样，它产生疼痛的几率呢就会小很多。
And then the third one, I believe this is the most important part. If you want to do more the activation exercise, you have to do it at the near maximal effort. And then I'm not talking about putting heavy weights. I'm talking about this kind of a simple muscle activation exercises with isometric contraction.
好，那如果说你的目标呢是做一个激活、做一个启动的话呢，有一个很重要的地方就是说，你要使用尽最大的努力，接近最大的努力的这样的强度。那这并不意味着你要用很重、很大的负荷，而是可以像刚刚一样，使用那个等长收缩的方式呢，来达到这个激活的效果。
Especially for many athletes that I've been training, they know this deal a lot, that I use a lot of the isometric contraction in the beginning, solely for activating the muscles, one thing, but also for the neuromuscular effect, because the near maximal effect means that you get more brain signal going to the working muscle. It's a very good way to activate those muscles in a warm-up routine before they go to practice.
好，那所以在我们的训练过程中呢，会加入很多等长训练的元素在里面。那也因为透过这个等长训练的元素呢，它的神经肌肉的征召呢，它就会得到它想要的部位的效果这样子。那除此之外呢，它就可以达到我们想要的这个训练的预先准备的情况。所以我们会放在一些热身的动作里面，我们也用等长收缩的方式。
And I mentioned in the beginning that if you have more the anterior tilt, like a high arch on your lower back, okay, people might feel so much more on the hamstring. It does happen. If that's the case, make sure that you let them tuck in the hip this way and then do the glute contraction, and then I'm pretty sure they feel it more for the glutes, not to the hamstring.
好，所以在我们的训练过程中，有些人会在做臀桥式的时候，会有一个骨盆前倾的状况，就是他将他的背啊拱起来，屁股翘起来，骨盆前倾的情况。那在这个状态下，如果你做训练的话呢，会比较多是腿后腱肌群的感觉会比较多。那所以这时候呢，就会建议说，你今天将你的屁股这样稍微塞进去，也就是做一个有点稍微反向的动作，然后在做这个臀桥式的时候呢，会比较多激活到你的臀部。
Okay, so this is just one example of hip activation. I did it with what's called a supine position, face up, okay, and then try to activate the glutes, and then also the hip flexor to stabilize the pelvis.
那像我们今天做的示范动作是做仰躺的方式，然后我们做一个臀部的激活，然后髋屈肌的使用这样子。
Okay, and then if we can hear from you guys that if you like this kind of demonstration to introduce a different type of exercise, I'm more than happy to show people. And then this is not the secret, this is the right information. That's why we want to provide this kind of exercise to you guys, so you guys can use this kind of warm-up protocol for core stability and then pelvic stability.
好，那如果在荧幕前的各位呢，对这样的这个训练的介绍啊、训练展示有兴趣的话呢，那欢迎大家就是踊跃的发言或留言、点赞等等之类的。那我们之后呢，也会去展示更多的不同的包括你的核心启动啊，如何去放在你的热身的里面啊，或是核心稳定等等之类的动作，都会在这个部分。那它当然不是什么秘密，它只是一个正确的资讯。那我们想做的事情就是把正确的资讯呢传达给在荧幕前的各位。
Especially for this kind of demonstration, if you guys like to see more and more, we have an awesome coach who can do the demonstration very well, so you can experience different type of stabilization. So I look forward to give you guys more variations and progression of those exercises.
好，那如果大家对于这样的主题是有兴趣的话呢，那我们也会很乐意去为大家做展示啊，或者是为大家讲解这些细节的部分，这样。
Okay, thank you very much, and see you next time.
好，那谢谢大家，大家拜拜。